Ever find yourself like really pondering those big questions? Like, what makes something right or wrong, good or bad?
Yeah, it's something we all kind of grapple with daily, right?
Yeah,
But I think it's rare to actually dig into the why behind it all.
totally. And you know, our listeners are the curious kind. They want to get to the bottom of things. They don't want to wade through a whole bunch of jargon and theory.
Absolutely. So we're diving into something philosophers call normativity. Sounds a bit intimidating, but it's really about those fundamental judgments we make all the time.
Right. Like, I can say it's Tuesday. That's just a fact. But if I say you should be wearing a hat on Tuesdays,
Uh-huh, exactly. Suddenly there's this extra layer. You're not just stating something, you're saying how things ought to be. That's normativity at work. It's all about guiding actions, shaping attitudes, telling us what's valuable, what we should believe.
it's everywhere, isn't it? Like, is it ever okay to break a promise? Is this painting actually good? Those kinds of questions.
Yeah, from big moral dilemmas to questions about knowledge, even aesthetics, it's all filtered through this lens of normativity.
So that's our mission today, to tackle the big philosophical questions about normativity. And we're using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry as our guide.
Right, we're going to ask, can these normative claims, these shoulds and oughts, actually be true in some objective sense?
Are there like real world normative properties? Like, is goodness a thing that exists out there?
Exactly. And how do our own thoughts and feelings play into all this? Let's see what we can uncover.
Okay, so we're talking about normativity, but what is it exactly? It feels slippery, you know?
Yeah, it's surprisingly tricky to define. Think about trying to understand the physical world. We've got our concepts of things, like gravity,
Right.
and then there's the actual stuff out there, the force of gravity itself. With normativity, it's similar. Are we trying to understand our concept of fairness?
Or is there an actual property of fairness that exists in the world, almost like a flavor certain situations have?
I like that, a fairness flavor. Now think about G.E. Moore, a philosopher. He had this idea called the open question argument.
Okay.
He said, no matter how you define a moral concept like good, using natural terms like good is what makes people happy, you could always ask, okay, but is it good?
So even if something does bring happiness, we can still ask if it's morally right. Like, good has something extra that can't be captured just by happiness.
Exactly. It suggests that our concept of good might be special, not just another word for something observable. But here's the twist. That argument's about our concepts. It doesn't tell us if there's a real property of goodness out there in the world.
So even if our ideas about good and bad are unique, the underlying reality could still be something like scientifically describable.
Exactly. And while concepts are important, the real debate in metaethics, that's the philosophy of morality, is about metaphysics.
Hmm.
Are there really normative properties and facts out there?
Right. Because we all use these normative concepts, right? We talk about what we should do all the time.
All the time. So we're focusing on whether these shoulds and oughts point to something real beyond our minds.
Okay. But before we go further, we got to make sure we're on the same page.
Sure.
When we say properties, what do we mean? What about concepts, propositions, beliefs, all that philosophy jargon?
Right. Think of properties as the actual characteristics of things.
Right.
Redness, heaviness, those are properties.
Mm-hmm.
Concepts are our mental grasp of those properties.
Okay.
Propositions are statements that can be true or false, like, this apple is red. Beliefs are our acceptances of those statements.
Got it.
And facts are the actual states of affairs that make true propositions true. The fact that the apple is red makes the proposition, this apple is red, true. So are there normative facts and properties too?
Okay. Properties are real-world characteristics. Concepts are our ideas about them. Propositions are the statements we make. Beliefs are what we hold to be true. And facts are the reality that makes our beliefs true.
You got it.
So if there are normative properties, is there one that's like the foundation for all the others?
That's a key question.
Mm.
If there are normative facts, is there something normatively fundamental, the bedrock of all things normative?
Okay. So what's the top contender for this normative bedrock?
Many philosophers think reasons are fundamental. Thinkers like Parfit, Scanlon, Dancy.
Okay.
They say facts about goodness, obligation, all hinge on reasons. Like, something's good because there are reasons to desire it.
Okay, so reasons are the base level, but are there other views?
Oh, absolutely. Some say value is fundamental. Like McGuire, he argues reasons exist because something is valuable. You have a reason to do something because it promotes value.
Interesting.
Others, like Howard, say fittingness is key. Certain responses are inherently fitting, like admiring something good, and that fittingness is the basic normative property.
Okay.
Then you have those who flip it around. They say thin concepts like good are less basic than thick ones like courageous.
Hmm.
Philosophers like Roberts and Morton suggest that an act being courageous might be more fundamental than simply saying it's good.
Wow, so many options. But if we pick one as fundamental, like reasons, what makes that property normative? Why should a reason guide us?
That's the big question. We can explain why something's wrong by pointing to reasons against it. But what makes those reasons matter?
Right, we've described a chain of becauses, but haven't explained the underlying should.
Exactly. Take chess, for example. There's a reason to move your rook a certain way, right?
Sure.
But that doesn't have the same weight as a moral reason, like not betraying a friend.
Yeah, different kinds of reasons for sure.
So if reasons are fundamental to normativity, they'd have to be robustly normative reasons. But what makes them robustly normative? It gets circular if we say a robustly normative reason. It's just one that makes things that depend on it, well, robustly normative.
Right, we're back where we started. So even if we pick a fundamental property, we still need to explain its normativity.
Precisely. And remember, this is all from a worldly perspective, properties, facts. But you could have similar debates about concepts. Like, is the concept of a reason fundamental, or is it the concept of good?
Back to more in the open question argument.
Exactly. The conceptual and worldly can diverge. But it gets even wilder when we consider error theory.
Error theory. Sounds ominous. What's that about?
It's a radical view. It claims that all our basic normative claims are false. Not just some, but all.
So when I feel strongly that lying is wrong, I'm not just expressing an opinion, I'm making a false statement about the world.
That's the error theorist's position.
Right.
Now, they have to be careful. They can't say all normative claims are false. That leads to logical problems.
Okay.
So they focus on basic normative claims, claims that directly ascribe a normative property, like John's action is morally wrong.
Okay. But doesn't that lead to contradictions? Like, John's action is wrong and John's action is permissible. Can't both be false, can they?
Good point. That's a challenge for error theorists.
Mhm.
If wrong and permissible are both basic properties and all basic claims are false,
Yeah.
then both statements about John would be false. But it seems impossible for something to be neither wrong nor permissible.
So how do they get around that?
One way is to narrow down the fundamental properties. They might say permissibility isn't fundamental, it's just the absence of wrongness.
So permissible just means not wrong.
Right. Another approach is to deny that those concepts are logically linked. Like, Jonas Olson argues that X is not permissible doesn't necessarily mean X is wrong. He says it's more about how we talk than strict logic. So both statements about John could be false. Nothing's wrong, nothing's permissible.
Whoa, that's mind-bending. So our whole framework for right and wrong could be totally off.
It's a radical view, for sure. But error theorists have arguments. Perhaps the most famous is Mackey's argument from queerness.
Queerness sounds, interesting.
It is. Mackey used queer to mean odd or strange in a deep metaphysical sense. His argument is basically this. If moral facts existed, they'd be so bizarre, so unlike anything else, that we have good reason to think they don't exist.
Okay, so what makes these supposed moral facts so queer?
The argument has two key parts. One, if moral facts existed, they'd be queer. Two, there are no queer entities. Therefore, no moral facts.
Right, but what kind of queerness are we talking about?
Mackey wasn't super clear, and different philosophers have interpreted it in different ways.
Okay.
Some focus on the idea that moral beliefs inherently motivate us, this motivational internalism thing.
Okay.
Others focus on the categoricity of reasons, how moral reasons apply, regardless of our desires. So it's about this extra oomph that moral facts supposedly have.
But even if they are unusual, what's wrong with that? The unicorns are different from horses, but we don't use this argument to deny horses exist.
Exactly. So what is this queerness that justifies disbelief? One interpretation is that moral facts would be non-natural. They wouldn't fit into the scientific world.
Okay.
But the problem is that assumes metaphysical naturalism is true, that only natural facts exist. We can't just assume that to argue against moral facts.
So saying they're queer because they're non-natural only works if you already believe everything is natural.
Exactly. Another take is that moral facts would be a whole new kind of thing in reality.
Okay.
But that overgeneralizes. Even basic physical properties would be queer under that definition.
So we shouldn't believe in physical objects either.
Right, it gets absurd.
Yeah.
A third possibility is that moral facts make our theories less parsimonious, less simple.
Okay.
This ties into Occam's razor, the idea that simpler explanations are better. But not everyone agrees on the value of parsimony, especially outside of science.
And even if we value parsimony, it's not the only thing that matters.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Some say moral facts aren't just less parsimonious, but completely unnecessary to explain anything. But that's a whole other debate with its own issues.
So the queerness argument is thought-provoking, but not a slam dunk for error theory. Are there other arguments they use?
Yep. There's one based on necessary coextension. It goes like this. 1. There are no necessarily coextensive but distinct properties. 2. If a moral property exists, it must be necessarily coextensive with some natural property. 3. Therefore, if a moral property exists, it's identical to some natural property. 4. Moral properties are not identical to natural properties. Conclusion. There are no moral properties.
Okay, break that down. What's necessarily coextensive?
It means two properties always apply to the same things, without exception. The argument relies on supervenience, the idea that you can't have a moral difference without a natural difference.
So if being wrong always and only occurs when causing suffering occurs, they'd be necessarily coextensive.
Exactly. And if they are, the argument says they must be the same property, but the fourth premise says they're not the same. So moral properties can't exist.
But that fourth premise is doing a lot of work. Why should we accept that moral properties aren't natural?
You got it. That's a central debate in metaphysics. It's key for non-naturalism, the view that moral properties exist but aren't natural.
So whether morality can be explained naturalistically is a huge question in itself.
Absolutely.
Which leads us to, can we explain normativity in naturalistic terms?
Let's clarify. First, what are we trying to explain? The general property of being normative, specific properties like wrongness.
Okay.
Second, what kind of explanation are we looking for? A definition in natural terms.
Right.
And finally, what counts as naturalistic? Generally, things studied by science or observable.
So can we break down being good or being a reason into things like brain states or behaviors?
That's normative naturalism, but there's disagreement about what a naturalistic explanation even means. Minimalists have a less demanding view. They focus on how we use normative language.
Okay.
Realists think there's an objective property of normativity that needs explaining.
And we set aside normative formalism, which says normativity is just following rules because we're looking for something deeper.
Right. So what are some approaches to a robust naturalistic explanation? One is primitivism. It says normativity is fundamental, can't be fully explained in non-normative terms.
So some things just are normative, end of story.
Pretty much. Another is normative conceptualism. It shifts focus from properties to our thoughts. It says normativity isn't in things themselves, but in how we think about them.
And there are different types of conceptualism, right?
Yep. Anti-realist conceptualism, or expressivism, says normative statements express attitudes, not beliefs about facts.
Okay.
Realist conceptualism, or presentationalism, says our judgments do represent real states of affairs, but the normativity comes from how we conceive of them.
So when I say hitting is wrong, I'm referring to the act of causing harm, but the wrongness comes from my concept, not the act itself.
Exactly. It avoids having to find wrongness in the world. But then why do some concepts seem inherently normative?
Right. Wrongness just feels different from blueness.
Exactly. Then there's normative objectualism, which does believe in worldly normative properties. And if they're naturalists, they'd be engaged in reductive normative naturalism, trying to define these properties in natural terms.
But that runs into the just two different objection, the feeling that moral properties just aren't like natural properties.
Right. Like Parfit's analogy, wrongness is as different from any natural property as heat is from cabbage.
But then there's the counter argument. Heat feels different from molecular motion, but science says they're the same. So maybe our intuitions can be wrong.
Exactly. So the debate is complex, from what we're explaining to the kind of explanation we want.
We've covered a lot. The Stanford entry also mentions specific strategies for explaining normativity. Can you give us a quick rundown?
Sure. One strategy is explaining it through motivation. The idea is there's a link between our normative judgments and our motivation to act accordingly. But that link is debated too.
Right. We all know people who know what they should do but don't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another approach grounds normativity in rational agency. It looks at what it means to be rational and argues that norms are inherent in being an agent. But can we define rational agency without presupposing normative ideas?
Right. Defining rationality without ought seems circular.
Exactly. Then there are explanations based on categorical requirements of rationality. These apply regardless of our desires.
Okay.
The challenge is explaining those requirements without using other normative concepts. Another strategy grounds normativity in human flourishing or well-being.
Makes sense.
But what counts as flourishing varies wildly between individuals.
Right. Flourishing for an athlete is different from flourishing for a philosopher.
Exactly. Finally, there's a pluralist teleology. It grounds normativity in systems of standards, morality, prudence, etc., that address problems we face.
Interesting.
But how do we resolve conflicts between those systems? And how is best suited defined?
So lots of attempts, but each has its own hurdles.
Definitely. It shows how difficult it is to explain normativity.
We've focused on the nature of normativity, but the Stanford entry also talks about mind dependence. What's that about?
This is a big one. It asks whether normative facts depend on our minds. Are they grounded in our beliefs, desires, attitudes, or agreements?
So is morality just a reflection of what we think is right or wrong?
That's the heart of the debate. Are all normative facts, or at least moral facts, mind-dependent in a deep metaphysical sense?
Okay. What are the arguments for mind dependence?
One is epistemological. It's as if moral facts were mind-independent. How could we ever know them?
Mm.
Our minds evolved for survival, not tracking objective moral truths. So moral facts must be connected to our minds to make knowledge possible.
So our ability to have moral intuitions suggests morality is tied to our minds.
Right. Another argument comes from reason's internalism. One version says to have a reason to act, you must have a motive that the action would serve.
Okay.
If true, it suggests reasons are grounded in our mental states.
Like my reasons for acting come from what I want or care about.
Exactly. A third argument points to moral disagreements.
Yeah.
We disagree even with full information and rationality.
But we disagree about other things too. Does that mean science is mind dependent?
That's a counter-argument, for sure. But some say moral disagreements are different.
Okay.
Finally, there are thought experiments, like the ideally coherent eccentrics.
Okay.
They imagine people with bizarre but perfectly coherent desires. If normativity is mind-dependent, these eccentrics might have reasons to act on those desires, which seems wrong.
Like Caligula enjoying torture, if his desire was coherent, would he have a reason to torture? That feels wrong.
Exactly. Mind independence folks say our intuition that Caligula is wrong suggests normativity isn't purely subjective. But mind dependence folks have responses.
So it's about whether normativity comes from something objective or from our own minds.
Exactly. And there are strong arguments on both sides. It's a really active area of debate.
Wow, we really went deep today. From defining normativity to error theory to mind dependence, no easy answers here.
Definitely not. And it's like that so what challenge. The more we analyze these fundamental things, the more complex they get.
It's like peeling an onion, but every layer makes you cry a little more. So, listeners, as you go about your day, consider what's guiding your judgments.
Are you using reasons, values, what feels appropriate?
And do you think your sense of right and wrong reflects some objective truth out there? Or is it tied to our human experience? It's something to ponder.
Absolutely. We hope this deep dive gave you new ways to think about these fascinating questions. Keep thinking critically, keep questioning, and keep exploring philosophy.